Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, I have the pleasure of being joined by Jim O'Donnell. Jim comes to us from NADA, where he's just recently started a new role there, but Jim has a pile of experience in our industry, a lot of insight, and a lot of just pretty awesome knowledge. So, Jim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Good. How long have we been at NADA now?
Man, I am brand new. I am approaching 6 weeks as I look at the date.
How has it been getting acclimated to everything NADA?
I'll tell you, it has been one of probably the most seamless and just impressive onboarding processes that I've seen of or heard of within an organization. So it's been very clear cut, organized. I mean, talk about you show up to work and the benefits are actually even better than what you kind of anticipated when normally the hiring managers and HR oversell in the recruitment process. It's actually, there's a lot that can be taken away from the onboarding here. So it's been great.
Well, I think we'll probably implement that into part of our conversation as we go. I think there are a lot of things that we can all learn from that process, and it'll be fun to dig into that. But how did you get started that in your career that even led you to getting to NADA? It takes a lot of experience to get to the point that you're at. So how did you get things kicked off? How'd you get started?
Oh man, I pinch myself every day. I walk into my offices, go, man, do I really work here? And I think back, I started in this business as a valet, right? And I'm still very close with the person who hired me. He's still a close friend and mentor, getting my first job in the business. And sometimes I curse him and sometimes I thank him, for what he gave me. And I remember sitting down for this valet interview, and I looked at him and I said, "All right." I said, "So do I get the job or not?" I said it in the interview. I said, because I've got an offer for a seasonal position at UPS for Christmas. So I want to know if I get the full-time job or if I'm going to go with the seasonal job. And he was like, "Yeah, you're hired." Right. And so I started off as a valet at a very large Ford store. And I quickly worked my way through kind of some problems that they had in logistics, right? Which kind of set myself apart from other entry level employees that I was kind of seeing the big picture and putting pieces together. And worked my way into service advisor and into management there at that store, and was there for almost 10 years. And then kind of made this jump where I went right from retail into operations consulting. And I worked with a company that contracts nationally for the OEMs, doing things like express service initiatives and fixed operations consulting, process improvement, the OEM field staff training. And I was able to see the best and worst in dealers kind of coast to coast. After that, I had a young family and it was a lot of travel. Was able to take a job at a dealer group locally where they were going from used cars. They were high volume used car independent dealers breaking into the new car world. And they were looking to get guys like myself with extensive new car backgrounds, help build up that new car side of the business for them. And I was a corporate fixed operations director for them for about 4 years, including a stint as a general manager. So I'm probably one of the few in the industry. I've been a GM. I've never sold a car a day in my life, but I was able to leverage those years of experience and process and operations and successfully run a Honda store for them as a general manager. And at that time, I was able to attend the NADA Dealership Academy, which was kind of a long-term goal. I still remember as a consultant doing work at a store that has a direct line of sight to the NADA headquarters. And I remember the exact day that I was talking to a fellow consultant. I think you may have had him on the show. His name's AJ Holst.
Yeah.
Yeah, AJ's a good friend of mine, and AJ and I were standing at this dealership, and I said, "Man, I'm going to go to that academy one day." And he said, "No, you have to go back to retail for that, or you have to be a GM." And I said, I don't want to go back to retail right now, but I don't know. I'm going to go to that one day." I was standing right there, and was really a special thing when I finally got to attend. And then not only that, I was able to attend the academy. We actually elect class presidents for each group that comes through. It's a year-long program. It's very, very, very intensive in kind of the regiment and the workload to do this. And I was able to graduate from the academy as class president, which then led to the connections that ended me up here as one of their newest instructors.
That's crazy. And I love stories that share the whole journey, right? Where when you started off as a valet, being able to show other people that it's okay to start there. It's okay to learn the business from the ground up. And not only is it okay, but I think some of the most successful people in our industry have come through that route. And I feel like our industry could do a better job at telling those stories because it is phenomenal. And as you were going through it, I did have one question for you. Do you recall if you would have been paid more at UPS or going to the dealership?
At the time, definitely UPS at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to be honest, like knowing my work ethic and kind of who I am, I in the long run, it's hard to say where I would have ended up better financially, and maybe that changes kind of year by year, right? So some of the UPS drivers just renegotiated their union contract, and they're making very very big money
They did all
now.
right.
They did all right.
Yeah.
And so there's potential there, where it's going, oh man, stress benefits. Now, where I am sitting right today, this moment, working for the association, working for a nonprofit, the impact, the scale, the kind of what's behind me now, I think, definitely ended up on the right path. And sometimes that's, doesn't matter your choices. The universe always puts you right where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. So, I don't really look back too much on that. Um, as I was coming up through the business, I kind of made my bones during the '08 recession, right? Franchise losses. And I was in college at that time. And I dropped out of college because I made that choice where I go, okay, this is how much I make now. This is how much I'll make with my degree and my potential earning if I continue on my trajectory. And college didn't pencil out, right? There was just no world in which case I was going pre-law, I was going to be a lawyer or at least something in that realm. And there was just no ROI I could work out where it made sense to continue. And the automotive industry is one of the few places that people can work their way up and go from literally a valet to six-figure salaries without college.
Yeah.
And to have an impactful, enjoyable career, if you make the right choices, work for the right people, have the right mindset.
Well, and I think you can sense the pride in every conversation that we've had, your pride in the industry, your pride of the business world, and really how well you've gotten to know this world. And I think that's something when we do talk to young people, we talk about bringing this next generation in. And I've given presentations at, a seminar or something like that, where people say, well, how am I supposed to compete with Amazon right now? How am I supposed to compete with even McDonald's for entry level people? And I think my message always is you have to tell them it's about more than the money. You have to sell them on the vision of what they could do with their career. You have to tell them that in a realistic sense, you can work your way up here. And it's not just this position that you're setting yourself up for a lot of, I don't know, a lot of growth if you're a little bit patient and work your tail off.
Well, what industry other than retail automotive, especially when, and I know that you look at technicians of all sorts, but when you look at the new car world, which is kind of the position I speak from, that's not my only background. But, when you look at the new car dealership world, what other industry can you literally do anything that you're passionate about, right? If it's technology, great, we're there. If it's marketing, if it's artistic design, if it's curation. I mean, there literally isn't a category that you can't apply. There's not a single degree, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Psychology. One of my coworkers just got her master's in organizational and leadership psychology, right? Um, there's nothing that this industry doesn't touch. So, and that's actually what I'm passionate about. I'm not a car guy. I'm not. I never was. I don't really care. I mean, they're cool. It's fun. I'm not really a car guy. I appreciate when things are unique or fast or good looking, but I like this industry because of its diversity and variables.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone there either. I think a lot of people see a lot of what you just talked about with the opportunities that are available, and the business as it sits is it can be a really fun business. You can do something that's pretty cool in a variety of different ways. I know even with regard to technicians, you talk about the technology that's coming and all of the advancements that have happened that make it far different than what it was 20 years ago. There are some really, really cool things. Not that there weren't in the past, it's just different. There's a lot of differences now in our industry. As you see kind of the evolution of the industry, and you've been around it for quite some time now, do you think that's more attractive or less attractive to an outsider?
Well, that's kind of what started our conversation about getting together for this podcast, right? Is how we view technicians and the up and coming generation. How do we inspire the young generation to get into it? And some of that is what the differences are and what's required to be a technician on a modern vehicle, right? So you kind of have two categories of techs right now. Is that you still have this holdover of these ICE engines, right, internal combustion motors that still need kind of traditional mechanical repair, and then you have this huge emerging kind of segment of repairs that are more akin to computer programming or electrical engineering. And most of my current dealer friends in service departments say they have two types of cars. They have cars that need no work, recalls, light maintenance, minor repairs, or they have absolute basket cases of wiring issues and programming and module problems, communication networks, and things like that. So it takes a whole different mindset for the people that are currently in the industry to stay relevant and capable and to maintain their skill set, right? And it's going to require a different type of individual to want to be involved in this.
I think sometimes that's scary for any type of shop to think about, but especially dealerships as it relates to trying to get this newer generation of technicians in, because we still have some runway with the ICE engines or those ICE driven vehicles, but also at the same time trying to really be able to embrace new technology, whether it's an EV or you're hearing more hydrogen, you're hearing some more of these other alternate fuels, clean fuels. And I think the more and more as if you were to put the fixed ops director hat back on and you're looking at this, it can be a little intimidating, can it? To try and keep up with everything, to try and make sure that you have the right tooling, that you're meeting all the manufacturer's requirements, that you're doing all of the things that you need to not only keep your former customer base happy, or it's your current customer base, but older cars, but also kind of accommodating this next generation of vehicle. It feels like it can be a big weight on the shoulders of fixed ops directors everywhere.
Well, I mean, it's literally devastating. So, you hit the nail on the head when you said, I mean, the tooling is one of the biggest parts of it. So if you're trying to operate a profitable business and then you all of a sudden have the OEM big brother, and I say this with love because we need our OEMs as business partners,
Yes, we do.
right? But they're, when they come through with these mandates that require, I mean, special tools that can cost thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Space, you need the space for chargers. You as a manager and as a business have to have awareness and the education on what type of electrical you need, where you need to place that. You have to think about efficiency, utilization, all for something that's still kind of in the unknown, right? It's still a horizon event that's going to happen that you're trying to prepare for, but it requires real today money, right? The capital is hard capital, and the idea is still a pipeline dream, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think in talking with some dealer principals that I've talked to, I think that was one of a lot of their biggest complaints from the OE side is that, hey, listen, yes, we know we eventually need to get these tools, but maybe there's timing wise and ways that we can approach this together. And at times it felt like maybe it's just like, hey, here's this whole truckload of mandatory tools. You're going to take these tools and you're going to like it. And then
I can put a real number on it. I can put a real number on it, Jay, is that
please.
So, I mean, Honda, just one example, Honda requires you to buy a forklift. So you have to buy a forklift. I mean, you're talking 20 to 50 grand, right? Depending on your size and what you buy. right? A real number, Hyundai, Kia make you buy a battery table, no choice. It's drop shipped to you, special tool requirement. It's $15,000, right? And that's just two quick off the top examples. That's not including the chargers and the electrical upgrades and the circuit panels and everything else. So
It's really challenging to get your hands around. And I think, going back to my time in a dealership, we would put together a budget each year for the following year in terms of what our spend was going to be. And I do recall that being one of the challenges where you weren't sure when you were going to get a mandatory tool or when something was going to come across. And so you could budget all day long, but if you get something dropped on your plate, that's going to completely alter your budget. And then you go back to having those internal conversations. And I think, is it the end of the world? No. Most dealers can get around that, and I think be able to usefully use those tools. But I do think that's the hardest part when you're not able to plan ahead for it, right? Or just from a cash flow perspective, when you have a huge, $30,000 expense that you weren't quite planning on or didn't budget, it can kind of throw things off a little bit. So I think that's where people get a little stir crazy. They don't understand at times that process as to when a tool is automatically just shipped. I think especially as we have done some transition over to the EV world, that's been one of the bigger concerns, right? Is just, if we're not going to use this tool for a year, there's a chance this tool might be outdated by the time we actually even get a retail sale on the vehicle to actually even be able to use it.
yeah, no, I mean 100%. And you have to remember the butterfly effect that it has. I mean, that affects the dealer's ability to market and sell more vehicles. It affects their ability to be able to acquire more dealerships. And a lot of management staff within dealerships are paid on the bottom line, so that all of a sudden starts, affecting pay plans. I mean, it trickles down
Good point.
From the dealer principals all the way down to the entry level employees when you're trying to figure out how much staff you can afford. I mean, those all play a factor.
Well, I think this is a nice kind of segue into one of our points of conversation. We might have a couple here as we go through today, but talking about financial management and using financial statements. And I think most people in especially the dealership world are used to making decisions based on a financial statement, based on numbers in general. But a lot of times I think fixed ops might get left a little bit behind in terms of attention that gets, other than if you're going through a financial statement. If I were a dealer principal and I'm going through it, a lot of times I might be just skimming financial statements to find that one thing that jumps out at me, like a $30,000 purchase on tools that I can then pick out and kind of jump into. But are we missing opportunities by not investing more time in the fixed op side as it relates to the financial world?
Yeah, I mean, I think 100%. I think not only are we missing opportunities, and maybe more importantly, is that we're missing landmines that are within our business, right? Areas of hidden losses, essentially, right? Pitfalls of hidden losses, or potentially, money that we have deployed as a business, money that we have out there that we're not collecting on or we're not leveraging properly or in a timely fashion. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you say most dealers make decisions based off of the financials, and yeah, there's more and more of that. But the truth is, most dealers make decisions based off their gut. Um,
Yeah. I
you know,
probably said that wrong. As soon as I said that, I was like, that's not quite what I meant. But
yeah,
no, I totally agree with you.
and when it comes to skimming financial statements, many of them aren't looking at the service page at all. So, they're looking at total dealership. And if there's a problem, maybe they're looking at, the nets off of the departments. But chances are most dealers aren't making it past the first page or two, which are more summary and total dealership. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters. How is the total business operating? So that actually is a good segue into kind of what I'm doing here at the NADA Academy. And when I was hired in, they asked me if you had your choice of classes, which I guess maybe I should start a little bit back from the beginning. So
Yeah, please.
if for people who aren't familiar with the academy, NADA offers a wealth of training resources in person, both in person, live online, as well as written guides you can reference. The NADA Academy itself, though, is something a little bit more specific and special. And what that is that is 6 weeks dedicated to 1 week to each department of the dealership. So it goes through financial management, it goes through parts, service, new cars, used cars, leadership, with some other kind of ancillary trainings, classes, speakers, projects mixed in. It's based around intensive pre-work leading up to the class, getting familiar with what's going to be studied, and extensive post-work after the class, implementing the things that have been discussed and learned. So it's real-world application. And there is not another time in your professional life, in really almost any industry, let alone in automotive, where you get 6 weeks away from work to focus on the business and to focus on yourself. So it's tremendous, right? The information, the expertise from my colleagues and the other instructors, I mean, it's just amazing, the wealth of knowledge. But more importantly, the wealth of knowledge of the class itself. So what you learn from each other and through kind of that self-discovery is very, very important.
It's really, every single person I've talked to that's gone through the NADA Academy and has come out the other side, I think every single one of them have talked glowingly about the process and talked about how much they learned, how much they were able to absorb. And then the last point you made there, so many of them have become lifelong friends after the fact, and not just, hey, we happen to touch base, once a year. We talk weekly, we talk bi-weekly, there are so many friendships. Oh my goodness. There are so many friendships that have come out of it. So every time I hear somebody that has gone through it, they, in my experience, have always had kind of really positive things to say about the process itself.
Yeah, personally, I graduated in October, and my class has a WhatsApp app group, like a chat that we have going. That even to this day, we talk on almost a weekly basis. And most of it's business related. It's hey, well, who's using this vendor, this CRM? What are you guys doing for this process? But it's also personal, right? There's new babies, people get sick, people get married, people celebrate, and we do that all together. It's a very special thing.
It is. And I think anybody that's been in the industry for any amount of time knows the impact that you can have on somebody's life, or somebody can have on yours, by just being able to vent about something, right? And I think a lot of times people that are in the same set of shoes you are, being able to talk through things with them is maybe one of the most influential things or most impactful things you can do for somebody.
Yeah, sometimes just saying it out loud makes a big difference.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess that, to circle back to where kind of started on that. So that's kind of the setup of the academy. And so when I came into NADA, they had asked if I had my choice, where would I want to apply my knowledge, where would I want to focus as a class. And it's funny because you would think the natural thing is people are like, oh, he's going to be in parts or service, right? He's going to be fixed ops. And I said anything but fixed ops. Anything. I'll take anything but fixed ops. Because I didn't want to be pigeonholed. You very easily end up there, and if you don't continue to grow outside of your department and outside of your kind of primary skill set, how do you grow as an individual and a professional? And I kind of have this diverse background, a little bit more than maybe most service managers, fixed ops directors come into. It's not quite as narrow, so I really wanted to continue on that. So I said, ideally, financial management, right, which is like quote unquote the accounting class, or leadership, because I really enjoy talking kind of about those big picture, broad stroke ideas of how to guide people and develop teams. So fortunately, it looks like I'm going to end up in financial management. That's the plan now, which kind of people always kind of like gawk at, like, oh, why would you be there? Even when we first talked, right, you're like, oh man, what the heck? But my favorite thing is that it sets up a whole rest of the year for the students coming in. So as the first class, you set the tone and the expectation for the whole rest of the process, and you get to be there during those initial first week of kind of bonding and walking into each other unsure, where do I sit, what do I do, and you get to kind of bring them all together and bring that cohesion. But the other thing that I think is really important is that it's not an accounting class. And that's where a lot of people get it wrong. Is it's about managing financials off of a financial statement and off of your DMS reports, but it's not how to be a better accountant. It's about how to analyze the numbers, what to do with those numbers, how to compare them against industry standards, and how to make your dealership more profitable. And that's why it's the first week, is that you need to know those numbers, because they use the statement and those processes and calculations through the rest of the academy.
Now, I don't want you to give away the farm, but as you're getting acclimated with this, is there anything that sticks out as like a low hanging fruit thing that people overlook or don't, maybe a simple practice that somebody could implement and maybe change their fortunes a little bit in terms of how they go about financial management in a dealership?
Well, so, not to go too deep into it, I think this applies to dealerships. This applies to your personal finances too. And that is the statement at the end of the month that you get from your bank or your credit card. One is it's in the past, right? You can't change it. There's nothing you can do to go back and fix it in most cases, right? It's
Right.
already, it's done, it's over with. So you have to remember that. And especially on the business side, you can't manage your business from the past. You have to manage it going forward. So remember that it's historical and that it's just a snapshot. So you're looking at a piece of history, right? That can help guide your way on the steps forward, but you can't manage just from the statement. And really, you can't manage from any reports, no matter what it is. And so I always compare this to driving a car. You can't drive a car if all you're looking at is your gauges, right? Just looking at the speedometer. You drive the car by looking out the windshield, and you occasionally have to check. If you just look at your speedo, you're going to run into a tree. And it's the same sort of thing. So remembering that, and then the other piece of advice would be you manage the exceptions. There's tons of information in those statements, your bank statements, your credit cards, or your business financial statement. There's tons of lines of information. And one is you have to make sure that you can trust that the data going into it is good, but you also don't want to get bogged down on the things that are consistent and normal. And so you start to look for where the oddballs jump out at you.
That is great advice in general. And as you're saying that, I'm going back to my time in the dealership world. And one of the things that, as you're talking, really almost, it was like pulling a Band-Aid off a little bit, was say you went and you had 3 or 4 just great months. You're kind of living high on the hog. You have those really, really good months, and then you just have a straight up dud. Something didn't go right, and it didn't end in a good result on the financial statement. I had a really tough time with moving forward off of that to the next month, right? When it was a good financial, like when you're going through it and you're like, all right, we're kicking butt, all is great. And then the 1 month where you trip up, you're like, ooh, that stung, that one hurt. And for me, it was hard for me to get off of that part and really not just completely obsess over why it happened and diving into it. Sometimes it was in our control. Sometimes it wasn't in our control. And I struggled with that. That was a really, really good point.
And it has a trickle effect, right? Your attitude, your vibe, kind of your feeling towards it will change how you interact with your team and how you move forward, and the goals that you set. And it's also important to remember, and this is why I love conversations like this on a podcast that's somewhat geared towards technicians, because these are things that employees need to understand, is that you can have a record month as an individual, as a department, and you can actually lose money, right? So like the records that you hear and talk about are usually on the revenue side. So yeah, you sold more than ever, but you're not factored in for the new employee that ran into the door, and the fact that the car wash broke, and the fact that you increased the bonuses that month, which is great for the technicians, but cut into your bottom line. So, there's kind of 2 different celebrations that have to happen. And that is, production is great, but it doesn't pay the bills, right? You can't put sales in your bank account. You have to put net profit in your bank account.
Isn't that such a fine line to walk? Because in one sense, you want your team to know how good they're doing. You want them to really feel enthused that they're doing things the right way. But then on the other hand, from a leadership standpoint, if all you're doing is talking about that, then that technician that's out there might say, well, you know what? I've been working my tail off. We're getting record months every month. And maybe I haven't seen an increase in my pay, or I haven't seen something. And I think there's this weird dynamic where you're trying to uplift them as a leader, but then also you're a little bit worried that if you do that too much, then everybody's going to be looking at it and saying, okay, where's my piece of the pie? Right. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of shops in general do that terribly wrong, like just like go way one side or way the other side. And it's just such a fine line that you have to walk, and it can be a really, really tough one to find.
Well, I don't know if hard's the right word for me, right? When I think back
Sure.
about how I approached it, I don't know that it's hard. It's time consuming, right? I mean, it's involved is probably more of it, because I think if you spend time educating and communicating, then nobody's going, oh, we hit a record month, where's my money? Because they know what they have to do to get to their next salary point. They know their progression that goes, oh, okay, well, if we hit this 3 times in a row, then I'm going to talk about getting my pay raise, right? Or I'm already paid off of it because of my escalating bonus and kickers that I get, or whatever that incentive is you're running that month. And I think it's important when it comes to talking about the profitability overall is that you really only focus on controllables. So if you're hitting records in revenue, but the department is still doing poorly on the profitability side, what can the staff can control? They can control waste and unnecessary expenses and mistakes and comebacks and customer issues, and how they treat their equipment, and mindfulness and all those things that have a real solid cost when they go wrong. And you focus on that with them, and then the rest starts to fall in line.
Is your shop looking to fill open positions or grow your bench of candidates? Consider adding WrenchWay to your recruiting efforts. WrenchWay helps shops and dealerships all across the U.S. find better qualified candidates for their service centers. WrenchWay Top Shop memberships are only $150 per month and include unlimited job postings on the best job board in the industry, a guarantee of 10 qualified applicants, and the shops choose who is considered qualified, access to connect with and help over 650 high schools and post-secondary schools, and much more. Learn more about WrenchWay's Top Shop memberships by visiting wrenchway.com and selecting the For Shops tab under the Solutions dropdown. Link is in the show notes.
I want to stick on this communication side a little bit more, and it really does pertain to the financial side as well. But you kind of really struck a chord with me there, in that so often we hear from technicians that they feel like they're just a number, or that they are just out there to turn hours. And in a lot of cases, I mean, it's your job. You're supposed to be out there producing for the company. It's a business. We have to make money. But then I think that's where, just in general, we fall short on that communication side that you're talking about, because it does take time. It does take proactive effort to have those conversations. And a lot of times we're just scratching and clawing, trying to get by in our days. And we just, that communication side is so easy to talk about, yet it's so hard to do. What have you seen from the best dealers in terms of how they go about that, how they stay out in front of that? And you could probably speak from your own experience coming from the dealership world.
Yeah, I mean, and almost right. I'm almost too new at NADA to have some of those. What are we seeing here as a group? But
Sure.
in my past lives, right, as a consultant and personally as a fixed ops director, I mean, things that I've seen, things that we've discussed. It's everything from as simple as a daily meeting, right, to a one pager that goes to the technicians, the advisors, to your staff. To as complicated as daily boards that are updated, tracking those goals, all the way to digital boards that maybe track your goals versus other stores in your group or sister stores or competitors. But it's whatever it takes to make awareness. So that's going to be different depending on the size of your team, the age of your team, the geographic locations. Those are all going to play a factor in how you communicate it. But what I do know 100% is that it has to be clear, consistent, measurable, and it has to be things that directly impact and that the team directly impacts.
I have to get a shout out to Tully Williams at the Nilo Group. He does a phenomenal job of having his KPIs plastered all over video boards, all over the place. He does a really good job at using tools to be able to help communicate to his team so they understand. And I think, it goes beyond the visibility. It takes those initial conversations and making sure everybody's rowing in the same direction, that we're all going for that one thing, or at least we have objectives that add up to that one thing. And so often when we see unhappy technicians or technicians that want to leave, it's because we're not communicating properly from a leadership standpoint. We're not talking to them actively. And when we aren't actively talking to them, it drives anxiety in pretty much anybody, right? We don't just pin this on technicians. This is kind of everybody. If you're in a company where you're just not communicated with, it drives some level of anxiety, and that does not help your culture.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. In how you handle those onboarding situations and new hires and kind of set them down their journey. And, you're able to start with things real tight, not restrictive tight, real tight as in close to the chest. We're best friends because I want you to succeed, and then as things go and you guys learn each other, that communication can lessen. It's not needed as much. Then it can be quicker, faster check-ins. You can, talk differently to continue them down that path, but it kind of starts from how you set the tone in the beginning.
So as you're working through this class and going to be leading, what, in my opinion, I think it's brilliant that that's the class you lead off with to help get a true understanding, and not just of how to read a P&L, but like some of just how you manage with it, how you manage yourself with the P&L. How do you get people to look at the fixed op side a little deeper? And I know that's not what the intent of your new role is there, but I do think that's something from my end where I think we could have, one, more successful dealerships if they really, really focused on fixed ops. And two, if we went beyond just saying that we care about fixed ops, but actually do, right? Like, and I'm not saying that every dealership doesn't care about fixed ops. It couldn't be further from the truth. But I think some of the dealerships that I've seen that struggle with either getting technicians or having a good service department or a good fixed ops department as a whole kind of struggle because they don't make it to that page in being able to read through the financials. They don't prioritize it unless they have to, or something bad happens, and it just kind of always has a bad taste in their mouth. Whereas I think if we could get a little bit more understanding that putting some priority on that side of your business from a dealer principal standpoint can have a huge impact on your business.
Yeah, I mean, for a few years now, I mean, this varies depending on the store and make and things like that, but you're seeing 40 to 60% of gross coming from the fixed ops department. But it very rarely gets 40 to 60% of the attention, right?
It's a good point. I mean, what percentage of attention does it get?
Yeah, so in the academy class, we have people from all sorts of different backgrounds, everything from brand new, just into the business, whether they're a hire or maybe they're a successor in that business, a relative who, is planning to take it over someday, and this is how they're starting their journey, all the way to, 30-year veteran owners or, 30-year veteran managers who've been in it. So we see a wide range that come through the class and the program, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. We have to approach the class in that way. We have to approach it as if somebody may have never, ever heard or seen this stuff, but also make it valuable to the people who have. In one of my first classes that we're sitting in, we had a student who said, I get it. I get I should care about service. He goes, but it's just not sexy, right? He goes, but service just isn't sexy. Selling cars is sexy, right?
At least he's honest.
Yeah. And that's where the quote that I had given you before kind of comes into play. And I raised my hand to him and I said, okay, I want you to think about this. I said, you say, service isn't sexy. You're right. It's not. the sales department, especially new car sales, is like birthing out a baby. And no matter what that baby looks like, it doesn't matter if it's pink, lime green, purple, that person is happy. They just got a brand new baby, their car. They're naming it, they're buying accessories for it, like they're stoked for it, right? And the service department, we're the nurse that has to give the baby their 1 month shot, right? Like immediately, you're still getting to know this thing, and you're coming in and you have to come in for service, and we have to pinch your baby and make it cry. And it doesn't matter how well intentioned it is, you're going to hate us, right? And if that's the way that customers feel when they approach the service department, if they're uncomfortable calling, if they're uncomfortable spending time in the service department, if you're uncomfortable, if you don't think your service is sexy, how does that translate to your customers and future customers? If you think your service department is dirty and dingy or doesn't have as good of coffee or the right people, why would your customers think that they do? So take your feelings, multiply them by 10, and then go fix it.
And I think that is such a good way to put it. I mentioned this to you as we were getting the podcast rolling, that I think that saying will forever stick with me. That was a really, really good one, a really good visual as to how a dealership really is laid out in a lot of ways, how it's perceived. But I do think there are things that when you look at fixed ops and service specifically, that regardless of what your background is, even if you're like, I love selling cars and that's my wheelhouse, that's what I'm going to stick to, I think people could take advice from you in how your journey has come along, where you forced yourself out of that box and you forced yourself to grow in a way that's going to make you better. It's going to make you learn different things, and who knows, maybe there's things that you learn while doing that could apply to the operations of the dealership as a whole. But if maybe you take your mindset from, you know what, I love selling cars, I'm going to stick to that too. I just want to become a very well-rounded leader that knows every element of our business. I think you're going to have a lot of success in your career.
I think that goes true for anybody in any industry. And that's something I kind of have always done. I mean, even going back to my days as a valet, right? Like thinking to years and years and years ago, is I go, everybody kind of looks at this as the car business. What do we do in the car business? How do we handle this? It's like, well, we're not a unicorn, right? There's, how I think about it and go, okay, we have an efficiency problem. How does Amazon handle this in a production warehouse? We have a shipping problem with our car deliveries. How do we handle this as a logistics company? And so usually the first place I go for information to think about problem solving and leadership, first place I go is outside of our business. Who's doing it differently? Who's doing it a new way? Who's been doing it the same way that's tried and true at a much larger scale, not than our industry, but then of our individual locations, right? I think that's somewhere where I think we set ourselves back a lot by thinking we're unique. We think our market's unique. We think our business is unique. And it is in some aspects, but superficially. When you boil the actual problems down, having conversations about recruiting technicians, well, they're having the same conversation about recruiting teachers in education, about recruiting some types of engineers. Those are all the same. We're not the only industry that has a skilled worker shortage, right? There's literally laws around it. For IT and tech, it's the reason that Google can essentially import talent from overseas, like Europe and India and China, because we have skilled labor shortages. So how do they handle it, right? And which, by the way, is my $1 million idea, Jay, is that if you can figure out a way to streamline visas for technicians and to room and board them, the way that they do with, software developers, and you started pulling people in from places like Ukraine and Southeast Asia, you would fix our technician shortage overnight. So.
Yeah, I think I've actually had people reach out to me asking if we could adapt WrenchWay or make it able to accommodate that. And it's something we've talked about internally. It is crazy to think all of what would go into that, but I do agree, like just getting more people on it. Obviously, there's such a shortage right now that we almost have to do something that's a little outside of the box in order to be able to do that. But I do want to go back to your point on looking at other companies, looking at other, for me, I talk a lot about how I view teams of technicians very similar to like a college football team or an NFL team or whatever your sport is, right? That if you can view your team like that and start to act that way, where you're really, it's those people that are on the field, they're the ones that are really the stars, right? It's not the coach or the general manager. It truly is the people on the field. And if we can maybe shift our thinking that way, and you start to look at a team like a college football coach, where recruiting is such a big piece of college football, and it truly shows on the field. Those teams that consistently get 5-star recruits typically have the best teams, right? And so being able to look at it through that lens and see how much time and effort they put into recruiting versus maybe the NFL, where it's just, you're doing, you have a contract with a player, you either draft them, so the person has no choice as to where they're going for the most part. You're just drafting them and they're coming to you. We don't have that ability. I think looking at it that way helps you open up your eyes. And if you are a fan of like a sports team, or maybe it's not even sports, it's something completely different, but you can get your mind wrapped around a visual of something that you really are liking and passionate about, and kind of use those strengths to be able to change some things within your operation. I do think it can't help but maybe drive some of that passion if you look at it the right way.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. The vocational school near where I lived previously to moving to the Washington, D.C. area for NADA, the high school vocational school actually did like sports style signing events at graduation. So, employers
We're seeing
come
more of
down,
that.
yeah, meeting students. And I mean, and that's what you have to do. That you have to treat it like that. You have to treat it like you're a place to be. But here's the most important part where most people get it wrong. You have to deliver. So, when you go out and promise the world and promise the hours and try to get this top talent, you can say all the words you want. They're going to find out if you're a fraud real quick when they come on board.
Absolutely. I was just writing an article for a magazine, and I had Lisa Joseph on our team, who's been with me from the start. She's a brilliant, brilliant woman, has been in HR and recruiting for many decades at this point. And I was talking in the article about how you want to create a wow factor with onboarding. And she said, yes, of course, you want to really kind of lay out the red carpet for those folks when they're first coming in. But the key is what happens after that. The key is, does that actually follow through to when they are in your business, and are they seeing something different than what they had seen in their prior employers? And does it match what you were saying when you were trying to advertise to get them to come to work for you? And I think a lot of times, and she was perfectly correct in correcting me on that, because as I took a step back and thought about it, I'm like, you know what? She's 100% right. She is absolutely right. It's okay to wow them up front, but it goes way further than that. We need to make sure that what we're saying matches what actually happens. I think a lot of technicians, early on in my career, I remember signing up for a job where they advertised a bunch of stuff, and then I got there and started working there. I'm like, this isn't anything like they said it was going to be. And immediately in the back of your head, you're like, okay, this is short term. I'm not going to be here that long, because it just, if they were lying about that or over embellishing about that, then who knows, or why would they take care of me for the long haul? Like, it's just one of those things that kind of sets that negative feeling in you that doesn't correlate if it doesn't add up from the start.
I mean, honesty goes a long way. I've recruited some of the best technicians that I've ever hired while trying to fix broken stores. And, my pitch was literally, okay, so if I were to offer you the job, or if you accept this job, you have to know that it's going to be screwed up, right? Every day it's going to be screwed up. but that's why you're coming on. That's why I'm here. Is we're here to fix this and make it better. So like if you can shrug off the bad days, knowing that there's this vision of how things are going to be, and you can be a part of changing that and be a positive influence to help us get there, then this is for you. But if you're going to duck and run for cover because of a bad paperwork or lost keys, don't even waste my time or your own, because that's what you're walking into. Like, it's going to be messed up, but there has to be this light at the end of the tunnel. So I think sometimes we're afraid to call the baby ugly. And if you're trying to fix it, then you need to be honest. And if you're not, you still need to be honest. You frame it a little differently, but it still needs to be true. Hey, if you want to work for a store that has ice cream socials on Fridays, that's not us. You got to say it. Just say it, right? We're here to work hard and play hard, but you play on your own time.
I think the authenticity in what you just said there resonates so much more with people than if we do try to paint this lovely picture that nothing's wrong and everything's great. I think that immediately drives skepticism in somebody's thoughts on you as a person and as a company. And when you approach it the way that you just did right there, it makes it believable, right? It makes it like you understand what you're signing up for, and it's okay if it's not a fit, but this is who we are.
This, or where we're at in our journey.
Or where we're at. That's even a better way to put it. Yes. Yes.
And hey, and if it gets to be too much, I get it. Some days it gets to be too much for me too. But before you run off, right, come and talk to me, because we're in it together, right? We're in these weeds together. But we can build the path we choose. It takes the right people. We'll never get there if we can't be honest about what we're walking into and what it's going to take to move forward.
Well, and if you can tie that to your vision too, right? As a leader, you go into it with a vision. I think technician, service manager, advisor, doesn't matter what position, if they're a part of your team and you can be authentic up front, but then paint the vision of, hey, this is where we're at right now. This is where we're wanting to go. And it gives them some type of idea or some type of hope. I think hope is such an underrated thing. If they have hope that the business is going to move in the right direction, and hey, guess what? I get to be a part of moving that business in the right direction. That really fills in that purpose side and why they want to come to work in the morning.
Yeah, I think I was watching something about like elite special forces, right? And they kept saying, they go, we have a zero failure, or like a zero failure mission, right? We do not have the option to fail. And I think that's the standard that not just car dealerships or automotive managers, but that as any manager who has others in their care, is in a position of power or authority or stewardship over a team, that's the standard you have to hold yourself to, is that you have a zero failure mission. You cannot let down the valet. You cannot let down the dealer principal. You cannot let down the customer. You have to make sure that you can deliver. You can't let down your own personal family in the sake of all of that, and there's no balance in it. It's you have to be able to do all of that. You have a zero failure mission.
You bring up the customer there, and I want to talk, going back to the class that you're doing and being able to talk through financial management using financial statements. I think a lot of people get concerned that, maybe we go too far, right? We're too profitable and we're not treating customers fair, and we're almost pushing customers away because we're so focused on our P&L. How do you get that balance between performance and knowing that you do need to produce a profit? The reason for us to be here is to make a profit. At the same time, making sure that you're taking care of your customers and making sure that we're doing it in a fair and ethical way. I know that's a very, very loaded and vague question at the same time. But any advice to, this could be for any business really, but as it relates to how you keep pushing the boundaries of financials, but also really, really taking care of your customers?
Well, my gut reaction and answer is that you can't be too profitable. One is, it's a struggle to be profitable, period. But But two is, to your point of how do you push the boundaries? Well, you do, and the results that you net are the results that you net. And so what I mean by you can't be too profitable is that at some point pushing those limits of profit, if you hit that line, your customers tell you because they stop coming. The problem is you won't know when that is until it's too late. So it's like a trick question because you can't be too profitable. You'll be as profitable as the market bears. Just don't be on the other side of it when the market doesn't support it anymore.
Do you get the sense that we have dealerships that manage by CSI score rather than maybe their P&L, or rather than some other really key profit indicator or performance indicator?
I don't really think so. I think dealerships develop pay plans around CSI probably way more than they should. I think that the OEMs have kind of rigged that game for us in a way that it really reduces the value of the feedback and the numbers, right? By what they pick to exclude or include. Oh, well, we're going to survey all your customers, but not the recall ones that we messed up because that car's too old and they don't deserve it, right? Even when you look at like effectiveness of how well you service your defined customer base, well, even the way they define those numbers can sometimes be a little bit hairy in terms of judging your actual business. Pull the Volkswagen, pull the Nissan, pull the any brand name off the wall, and you have to look at your business standalone. How does it operate? And those CSI numbers and those retention numbers are based off of the cars you have sold, whether it's a car and you sold out of state to the other side of the world or not. That's your customer. That's a customer that you created. How do you maintain it, and how do you rate your business off of that? So they put too much focus on CSI and not enough focus on employee satisfaction, right? ESI.
I love that you just said that, because I just had John Spence, an author, on that wrote a book called Awesomely Simple, and he talked a lot about how customer satisfaction is never greater than employee satisfaction. And if the business is only focused on customer satisfaction and ignoring employee satisfaction, you're just not going to have happy customers, or they're going to be a lot less happy customers. And so when you said that, I'm like, that matches exactly what Mr. Spence said. And it is so incredibly true. You've got to take care of your people, because that's who's wearing the badge on the shirt. That's who's taking care of the people that we need to take care of. And that's where it will lead to better CSI scores. It will lead to just generally happier customers if your people are proud to be there and really, just truly, honestly love being there.
Yeah, I mean, those, that goes back to that's a very old saying that comes from, outside of our industry, right? It's another example of things that are coming from outside of our industry. And there's a ton of that. I was just reading a case study review from MIT this week that has to do with, analyzing complex, skilled, and specific organizations. In this case, they were mostly talking about political systems, right? Like, we as citizens and voters have to vote into a very specialized system and judge people on something that really we're not experts on, right? We're not, most of us are not political science experts. And inherently, that is the flaw and the beauty of democracy, right? So as a professional, to an objective, unencumbered or unindoctrined person, objectively looking at your actions, business practices, or situations, how would that kind of hold up against a civilian audit, right? So that's where CSI matters. That's where your customer's opinion matters. They don't understand the nuance of why you misdiagnosed the car. Frankly, it doesn't matter, right? Because you got it wrong.
It's good but tough advice, and I think I think that just in general, coming to terms with what CSI is to a dealership and being able to get the really, really good feedback that you're trying to get on top of CSI score, right? And just actually trying to get things like information and people to just conversation to be able to build what it is that you're trying to build. And I just thought that was phenomenal. That was really, really good advice.
Yeah, I mean, the key to it is just caring, right? So it goes back to your employees because they have to care, and your customers feel that. It's not gimmicks, it's not coffee, it's not donuts, it's not car washes and shuttle services and parking lots or buildings. Some of those things help and can add layers, but none of that will get you even to the top 25%, right? It just won't. You can't, like, you literally cannot buy that love. You cannot buy that love. It really comes down to you just have to care.
That might be the title of the podcast. You cannot buy that love. This was a phenomenal podcast. There's so much that we learned here. And as you go through your journey with NADA, I'm so excited to see what comes of it. I think you're an incredibly intelligent person. And for you to be the one that really kind of kicks off all of those classes and being able to teach about this, and about financial statements as a whole, more so the behaviors off of that. Just excited to see where you take this side of it, and know that you're going to do some really, really great things for our industry. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
All right, Jay, I got one last plug. I want to say thank you for having me on the show, but I have to plug. I just finished my first rough draft of a book I'm writing. So shamelessly, I have to plug, I am comparing business leadership to fundamental laws of physics. So how does the law of inertia, the law of thermodynamics, how does that apply to managing organizations and teams within the automotive industry and just in general? So I'm going to be looking to come back on if I self-publish that. Maybe
I will geek out over that.
What's that?
Yes. I said I will geek out over that. So we would be honored to have you back on once you get the book rolling, and I'm sure that'll just be an amazing conversation as well.
Awesome. Well, again, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. So it was a lot of fun today.
Thank you, Jim.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.